Okay. Did you have a motion? You mentioned that you.
Well, I can't make that motion on top of that. I think that's enough for now.
Okay.
To do that. We'll see if we get a negative there. I'll try that motion next time.
Okay. All right. Moving on. It's item 7B, discussion and possible action regarding the creation of a community-based task force with the purpose of reviewing federal, state, county, and city regulatory protections in place for War Mineral Springs and those other protections for which War Mineral Springs may be suitable. This item is Commissioner Cook.
In all of the research that I've done, I never really came across a basically an inventory of what regulations were in place at the springs. So considering the fact that it seems that we are not going to de-annex the property, I would like to form a task force, and I already discussed with the city manager, and he mentioned that he would make one of his staff available to help us. In particular, my concerns are water quality and quantity, as it may impact the sustainability of War Mineral Springs, the relationship of War Mineral Springs to the Myakka River watershed, and how that relationship might affect ownership, management, and development of War Mineral Springs, archaeological preservation issues, potential impacts to manatees and their habitat, wetlands issues, dredge and fill issues, and historic preservation. While these concerns are important, understanding the extent of the involvement of the various regulatory agencies governing land use restrictions that may be applicable to each of them is critical to the decision-making processes associated with any future action on War Mineral Springs. The purpose of this task force represents the kind of common sense due diligence which is long overdue. We must obtain a more realistic sense of where we stand with War Mineral Springs, and this is an important piece of the puzzle.
Questions? Vice Mayor Blucher?
Yeah, I think everything you just said was very important, but my questions are, you know, all the items that you brought up, Commissioner, one person or another has discussed that, either from the audience or from commissions or something. The committee, what you need to help me with is how can the committee help us determine that? The only way we can determine that is to actually do the testing, do the study, do the process. And that's what I'm not sure about, because to do the process, we're going into a lot of dollars, and I don't mind doing that. I'm not saying I mind doing that, but I'm worried about, because we're still on the item sell it versus not. So if you can help me with that, because the committee, you're just looking for suggestions, I take it, but help me with that.
Okay, well, actually, it is a task force, meaning it's going to be a very condensed venture, and they are, in my estimation, if we have a regulatory person, a couple of environmental people, a citizen at large, it will be community-based, as I mentioned in the agenda item, and maybe a builder-developer person, so that they have an understanding of land use. The reason is because we do not have, as far as I can see, as I stated at the beginning, we do not have basically an inventory of what regulations are in place right now. And the purpose of the task force is to determine that, present a report to us at the end of their work, and also in the report will be what are the regulations they found that might apply, because for us to go out in this process, my concern is always due diligence, and for us to go out and whatever we do with the property, whether we sell it, whether we keep it, whatever happens with the property, we need to know what regulations are in place. As many people spoke, they want to preserve and protect the springs, but we don't even know if it's being preserved and protected now. I hate to say it, we don't even know what regulations are in place now. As far as my research shows, if you can produce a document that shows what regulations are in place and make sure that that is the most stringent regulations that could be in place, then that would be cause for conversation. But it seems to me we need to know what we own. We need to know what, for instance, perhaps we heard some testimony, perhaps there's problems with contaminants. We need to understand, has that issue been addressed? And if not, well, then why not? Where are the regulations that would have forced that issue to be addressed? Let's find that out. I don't see any problem with going forth and asking a few members of the community to go out and produce a report for us. That's all, just for so that we can present to whoever comes up, whoever is interested in the property. We can present them with the report and let them know what kind of due diligence we have done in order to regulate the springs.
Commissioner DeFranco.
My question is who would appoint this task force?
Well, City Manager, how you have dealt with task forces before?
The appointment, my experience with these is the same as a committee or advisory board. If you're going to take this kind of action, it would be you all as a body making that decision.
So what you're saying is that you would have applications and we would review each application from the commission and appoint whoever for this task force.
Yeah, that's generally how I would think it would be done.
Okay.
I'm not sure that that's the only way, but it is the way I'm experienced with, and I certainly see our city clerks over their head bopping up and down too. So.
Normally, they do take applications, and then they're brought before the commission, and the commission decides who they want appointed to the board. That's the normal procedure we've done.
It would apply for the same thing as the task force.
Mm-hmm.
Vice Mayor Blucher.
City Manager, if this commission voted to ask staff to come up with a document for commission showing us what restrictions are in place, state, federal, and such, are you capable of doing that?
Yeah, I think we probably could.
Okay, thank you. No other questions?
Commissioner Cook.
The whole purpose of the task force is for community involvement and also transparency.
Okay. City Manager, I have a question for you as far as the team that was put together 2 years ago. I know, and Commissioner Cook, I appreciate everything that you're talking about with this task force and the protections and everything. It was suggested actually when the initial purchase happened that that would occur. But the whole process that was in place was the county had a team and the city had a team that were going to talk about these very same things. And they were in the process of putting together all the historical data, the archaeological facts, the geological, the hydrological, and all of that stuff. So how far along did we come with that?
You're saying that was 3 years ago?
No.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood then.
At the time, I said at the time of the purchase, right after the purchase, people in the community wanted to get involved in this. And instead of creating the task force, it was made up of staff from the county and the city that were doing all of this. And I'm just asking, how far did we come along? From what I understood in July of 2012, they weren't quite done yet, but they had been working on.
To be quite honest with you, Mayor, I don't know. Okay. I certainly don't recall there being any such concentrated effort as the way it was just described. Doesn't mean there wasn't, because I wasn't here at that point. But I mean, what staff has done in conjunction with the county, because our staffs work pretty closely together, They've done things like inventory of going in and to the cyclorama, cleaning it out, doing an inventory of those types of assets so that we had them protected, and you know, we now store them in combination with the county and those types of things. And as if you remember our presentation, I think it was in July of last year, part of that at the time had recommended, you know, the need, when we were still talking about an RFP, to have a in-depth geological, archaeological, hydrology-based study done by people who are experts in the field, and that type of thing. But that's a little bit different issue than what layers of regulation might already exist today, which I don't know that anybody has ever worked on any kind of matrix or anything like that for that particular topic. So.
And the, we do have within our ULDC, we have the Myakka River Overlay Zone, we have the protections for the manatee, we have, I mean, it is Chapter 9, 55, 57, 58 that were put together, and I think the latest update to that was like 05 or 06, something like that. So we really haven't had any new information to look at modifying those particular codes with regard to protections. Is that about the right time frame when those were put in place?
To be quite honest, off the
2005,
top of my head, I don't know what year they were adopted, but those
Okay.
are applicable sections of the code that deal with protections under the city's code.
Right. And some of those state, I think.
Some of the state ones are referenced as part of that as well.
Right. So I guess what I'm asking is that obviously at that time we had this data, but it's outdated. It would maybe be outdated 6-7 years later. So we haven't updated those sections since 2005-06. In order to make a task force for something like this, would the city have to pass a resolution like we do when we create other advisory boards?
If you were going to create a task force of this nature, any task force that represents the commission, it would be ordinance or a resolution.
Right. Resolution, usually we do that by, right? City attorney?
I would do a resolution.
Right.
I would specify, it looks similar to some of our other resolutions for boards, tailor-made, of course, to the purpose. I would not create a permanent committee, create an ad hoc, something that will sunset by itself. What you don't need another, maybe you do, I don't know, another permanent board. And then specify the number of people. Do you want qualifications? In other words, you want to have one person that has some environmental background, you want one person that has some real estate background, one person that, you kind of get the idea. So you specify, or maybe 3 at large or whatever it is, and you be specific with their mission so they know what it is. These are people that are going to be doing something for you, so they need to know very clearly what the task is. And then, of course, they would adhere to the meeting requirements that we all adhere to in your meetings. So, yeah, we can certainly help with that.
Okay. And because it is related to the springs, do we have to, based on the MOU with the county, does this have to be something that's done jointly with the county?
No.
Okay, we can do it on all right. Okay, I don't see any other lights on for questions. I do have some public comment. Gerald DeRozema? Wendy Namath?
Wendy Namath, Northport. I think that in theory, gathering as much information as possible is important. However, I do believe that the city and the staff from the county have spent a great deal of time reviewing and researching things and asking essentially a group of lay people to make decisions or recommendations about things that require specialized advanced degrees becomes a bit convoluted, because you're asking people who really are not versed in what the regulations are actually regulating to make recommendations on them. Just a thought.
Beth Mayberry?
Beth Mayberry, Almond Avenue. I guess I'm a little confused because I thought we were selling it. So I guess I'm confused about why we would want a task force to put into public, the public realm, any problems that might be there in a property that we want to sell. I think that if you are going to sell it, we don't really need to know about that because we've already decided. Why would we want to spend money looking at this? It just doesn't make sense to me. Secondly, people like you're talking about for the task force for regulatory, environmental, builder developers, those people are experts because they get paid. I think it's going to be much more unlikely to find really qualified people who are going to want to give away their expertise for something when they know we're getting rid of it. If we were going to talk about keeping it, that might be a different story. I think you'd have liability issues. If I had a degree and I was going to be a regulatory person and I was going to be on this task force, and you were going to say, oh, we're going to put this into public record, I personally would be concerned about liability. I know I'm acting on behalf of the city, but if I'm giving this to the seller and the seller comes back a year later and says, well, Mr. Whoever, you've got your words on it, you've got your signature there that you worked on this, and that's not correct, that's a big issue. I think that that's something we need to look at. So I just think that, you have to think about, what are we going to do if we do find problems? Okay, are we going to try to remediate them? Are we trying to, just put this together for our own benefit? I don't quite get the point of it. And that's just me. As I say to my kids, I'm just saying.
Brian McKenzie?
Brian McKenzie, Northport here. I think the city manager had it most accurately. It's not the specific regulations are in place, which I believe are very few. It's the potential jurisdictional issues that you will have with a variety of regulatory agencies. And that's right. There's never been a catalog of that. I've never been able to find one. I find some that list a few, some that list potential ones, but nobody's ever really looked at that area specifically with an eye to what you could possibly face. Is it a good idea? Well, it goes back to my exit strategy theory. I think you should know what you may be able to do with it, or what protections you may be able to invoke if it is going to be within the city, and if it is going to be regulated, and if you do want to preserve it, or conversely, the example of dividing it. There might be some considerations there that would that might affect that decision based on the sustainability of the springs. And all of those the regulatory agencies with jurisdiction will come in and tell you. It isn't anybody else that's going to tell you. So I think it's a good, certainly a good diligence, part of an exit strategy. And I agree that it's not been done to date. That study about the groundwater hydrology, that was supposed to have been done. I think it was never done because of the cost of it, but that's not what we're looking at there. There's some literature available. So anyway, that's my thought on the idea.
I don't have any more cards.
This is where I wanted my card to be. It was instead of the other one. That's possible.
Okay, Mr. Dell.
My name's Bill Delt, and I'm a taxpayer, property owner here. With the exception of a detailed hydrological study, 99% of what you're looking for has already been delivered to at least the previous commission, and I think most of the commissioners probably didn't recognize it. We jumped through, over a 1.5 year period, every hoop from the feds to the state to the county to the water resources people to the marine environment people. Had 3 hearings with, and in addition to that, the archaeological folks. And until Cypress Lending pulled the plug on us, we have a letter of accommodation saying, we like what you proposed, we've looked at your plan, all the details are in place, you should do it. I'll be glad to provide you all with complete copies of those presentations if you'd like. I think the concept of a working group has merit, but this would be rather, it's just a starting point. We've gotten a long way down that road to where they were ready to approve the rehabilitation of the spring. Just to be clear, the only exception was the detailed hydrological work that needs to be done to be able to project some longevity on the flow of the spring. That's the only remaining piece that I'm aware of after living around here, diving the springs for 25 years and watching this develop. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more public comment coming forward. And once you get there, just give that to clerk and state your name for the record, please.
Evening, Commission. My name is John Bieber, and I live in Northport. What I do in Northport is I teach leadership. I teach decision-making, problem-solving, and it's been kind of horrendous looking tonight. And I don't mean that isn't a fault to you. It's just it's been painful out here watching this. I think a lot of us are wondering how long is it going to take to get to the two points that you're going to eventually get there, maybe weeks from now, but eventually you're going to get there. Number one is to continue down your path and sell the springs. Now, why you're not accepting the county's offer, I don't know. I mean, it's an ugly offer, but it's an offer. And the reason it's ugly is because you're selling the springs. You're not in a selling position. And if I were the county, I would want you to run sewer. I would want you to give me that land back, because the way they're looking at it is you want the county to do the heavy lifting and you want some of the money. Well, it doesn't work that way. Not in private, not in public. The other decision you might want to make, and I'm with you, Vice Mayor, is, sometimes I teach people in problem solving that as you're analyzing a problem that was made, sometimes you were the problem. It's an oops moment. There's no fault in that. We all make mistakes. We got to get over ego sometimes and realize that maybe we need to revisit our last decision and change it. There's no harm in that. Anyone that's never made a decision, please stand up. Nobody just sit down. Or no one that made a mistake, just keep sitting. Because we all make mistakes. There's nothing wrong. I was not in favor of us buying the springs. The last time I ever spoke up here was on December 13th. I was probably the second to last in the public comment. And my whole point that night was I wasn't talking about the people who wanted the springs or the people that didn't want the springs. I just didn't feel we did our homework. And it turns out we didn't do our homework. My concern that night was, how do we get out of this agreement if, in fact, we have to? Well, now we have to, maybe. I only bring that up is just bona fides. I try to think ahead on things like these, and where I'm thinking now is we made the decision, go with the springs. I don't like government being in business, but if it's done properly, a business is going to run it for us. It's not going to be the city manager's people out there cleaning the place, cleaning restrooms, selling food. Private entity's going to do that for us. We're just there to pretty much protect that environment. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have no more public comment cards. I'll entertain a motion or.
Move to create a community-based task force with the purpose of reviewing federal, state, county, and city regulatory protections in place for warm mineral springs and those other protections for which warm mineral springs may be suitable. This is to include land use.
Is that the motion? Oh, okay. I'll go ahead and second it.
I have a motion by Commissioner Cook, seconded by Commissioner DeFranco. Commissioner Cook?
Well, taking in mind what Mr. Delp said, the study that he mentioned was several years old, and the purpose of my task force would be, once again, community-based, also for transparency and also to update the information that Mr. Delp will hopefully provide for us.
Commissioner DeFranco?
I just have one question for the attorney or the city manager. If this task force, however created or what their function is, if they, if Cypress Landing decides they do not want them on the facility, does not have to engage with this task force, do they have pretty much all the right to do that, and they don't have to have this task force on their property and going over any type of, do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, we were trying to understand why they would need to be on the property.
Okay, so all this is just going over regulatory.
Right. You're having them gather regulatory information from everybody from the feds all the way down.
Which we already have.
Or they could access online, or they wouldn't need to be at the springs to read the federal CFR on
Okay.
the regulations that might affect a springs in the United States.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor Bleacher?
Yeah, I won't support this, but not that it's not a bad idea. The problem I have is we've just approved, through Mayor Yates' motion, that we're going to go out to the state and federal government and government bodies to see if they'd have any interest in it. I think if they do, this process that you're talking about will be done by those government agencies, number one. Number two, if that doesn't work and we want to sell it, and that's where we go. And remember, though, I believe that we can't sell it without de-annexing if it's going to the county. If it goes to private party, different story. But based on that, I wouldn't want to do anything to lower the value of something that I want to sell. And I'm not saying it would, but I don't know. So at the right time, I think that would be great to do. I just think the timing is bad for it now. That's all.